Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. A little further away with the camera today. I want to talk about something very serious, but I don't want to go into gory details because frankly they are too grotesque, and that is the Lindsay Clancy trial and what has been the reaction to it. Now, on the surface, I think the trial is really interesting for a lot of reasons. I think it tests some of the limits of what an insanity defense can be because she was already prior receiving treatment. This is 8 months after partum. There's a lot there that I think can be great fodder for debates when we are wondering whether an insanity defense is possible and what it actually looks like and where maybe the limits are and what you do with somebody that is apparently not curable by our, say, normal prescriptions for how you're supposed to be dealing with mental illness. All of those are really interesting debates. We can have those. We can talk about those in the comments. They'll be a little bit relevant to what I really want to talk about, which is some of the reaction to the trial, to Lindsay Clancy, that is frankly a lot stronger than I, in my black-pilled state, would have even really anticipated. That is, there's been hordes of women showing up wearing pink outside the courtroom to show their support for Lindsay Clancy. Now, if you don't know what she did, she murdered her 3 children. She was in a bad state for a while, supposedly. She said she was doing better. She waited till her husband, who had started working from home, hired a nanny to help her out and to make sure she was okay with the children, left to run an errand. As soon as he left, she slowly strangulated all 3 of her children to death. And that is what this trial is all about here. So why would women be standing in solidarity with that? Well, the word that gets thrown around a lot is empathy, but you guys know how empathy is usually a misused word. I have done some content on it in the past. What you are not seeing with women here is actual empathy. In fact, that would be really horrific to actually empathize with the killer in this instance. Mostly because empathy is about really understanding what somebody feels, to feel what they feel. If you actually understood how she felt, if you felt what she felt, then you would probably be horrified with yourself and horrified with her actions and want her to be executed. So what women are actually doing here, showing up outside the courtroom with a heart sign, and the joke now is, the morbid joke is, this is strangling your children. That's the emoji, is, strangling your children. So the people showing up saying they have all this empathy, the people posting about empathy for her, what they're doing is they're doing a form of emotional projection. People often mistake this. They see the boat full of immigrants and they're like, how would I feel if I were in that boat full of immigrants? That's not empathy. That's emotional projection. That's imagining you over there. So what they're doing is they're emotionally projecting some emotional difficulty they had following the birth of their children. Postpartum depression is a real thing that a lot of people have to deal with. The baby blues is a known phenomenon, and it's been known for a long time. The difference between women who have postpartum depression and Lindsay Clancy is not just time. Okay, her youngest child was 8 months old. That means there's been 8 months of this. Usually postpartum depression is attributed to the drop in hormones that happens after birth. Your body's full of progesterone and all of these hormones that help to preserve and to nourish the baby and cause your body to build the placenta and all those sorts of things. And then those goes away. There's a huge precipitous drop in those after birth, and they don't come back sometimes for several weeks, maybe even for a couple months, but 8 months is pretty long. So there's a big time gap there. But it's not just that. Those women who have had postpartum depression didn't kill their children. They were able to feel bad and yet not do incredibly evil actions as a result of feeling bad. And so when you put Lindsay Clancy in this position where she is going to be this avatar of women struggling postpartum, you are actually infantilizing all women. You're basically turning all women into potential psychopathic murderers. And that is not something that I am willing to do with women. I have enough respect for women, having known many women who've given birth and many women who've had emotional struggles and have never even thought about harming their children, not in their wildest dreams, or if they thought about it, they certainly haven't acted on it. Okay, so that's the big difference. A lot of these women showing up saying they empathize. There's some sort of female empathy. No, there's not. You're emotionally projecting. You're imagining, oh, I had a hard time. So she had such a hard time. It was so serious that she did something crazy. No, I disagree. I disagree in that as far as that assessment goes. I'm not on the jury, right? They may come to whatever conclusion they're going to come to based on the evidence that's being presented to them. But I think it's pretty different from a woman suffering postpartum depression. This is like psychosis. It's something much more severe. There's also a disturbing narrative that's going around that somehow the husband is responsible for these, right? And if you look at just the cursory facts, he tried his best to, it was a known quantity, how she was feeling, how she was acting. She was receiving treatment. And is he responsible? I think that's a pretty far stretch. And the other one is that he secretly killed his kids and somehow framed her, which to me, hey, Alex Jones got sued for $1 billion for saying Sandy Hook was a hoax. Maybe the people who say that this is a hoax should also lose $1 billion. Because fair is fair, right? Really bizarre. My feeling about this, and the reason that I find it so disturbing, is that to me it represents another element of the tribal nature that our culture is really descending into, where everybody's part of a tribe and everybody's tribe becomes the first and most important thing. And this includes women, female tribe. Women are half the population, but yet they feel the need to defend their tribe, to defend women in general. When I am not under the impression that women in general are on trial here, but one particular woman who happened to have admittedly done something that was truly heinous and whose defense is insanity. Now, moving just a little bit back to where I was talking about before, the limits of the insanity plea, right? There's a thing that my old teacher, Bruce Thornton, called the therapeutic ideal. So I'm going to steal this term from him and hopefully not misrepresent it too horribly, but kind of give my spin on it. Therapeutic ideal is a modern ideal, modern mindset about this relationship between rationality and action, where if people have the correct rational mind, in other words, if they're sane, then they do the correct actions. And when people do incorrect actions, or they do things that we would see as horribly evil, like in this case, then it's because there's some sort of deficiency of reasoning, that there's a mental illness, and therefore they're not really responsible for their actions, because in order to be responsible for your actions, you have to make some sort of informed rational choice towards those actions. And to me, this is really in competition with the experience of evil in the world. That is, people do evil things for apparently no reason sometimes. You know, there's senseless killings. There's people randomly killing other people on the street because of their race, things like that. These things happen. Are they insane for doing it? The therapeutic ideal tends to view anything that can't be rationalized as therefore insane. And so when it's like, why would somebody murder their 3 children? That's irrational. They must have been insane to do it. Rather than there was some incredible evil impulse that drove them to do it. And that therapeutic ideal applies to a bunch of other things too. People steal because they have to eat, right? All of the little stories we tell about why people do things come from our own theory of mind. And usually that's where it starts. Like, we start with our own theory of mind, where our model for a mind and how people act starts with ourselves. We think this thing is good, therefore we do it. We think this thing is bad. We understand that being slapped hurts, so we don't slap other people. It's normal and natural and actually appropriate. Where I think it becomes inappropriate is sometimes evil is incomprehensible. Sometimes we can't look at that darkness and say, I understand that that person had some sort of rationale, had some sort of good reason for doing it, even if we understand that that reason is immoral, right? Like if you need to eat and you steal to eat, we have this sympathy for it, even though we understand, like, stealing is wrong. So it puts the whole world into this place where people are ultimately victims of whatever circumstances they inherit. They aren't really morally responsible. They don't really have free will. And our justice system really works on the idea that people are able to make those choices, and that if people choose to do bad actions, they should receive punishment. Our whole society really has a need for that. And so when you're looking at a case like this, there's lots of questions about whether the person can make a rational decision, whether if they can't, they're still responsible. If they're receiving treatment and they're still unable to make a rational decision, what does that mean? What does that mean that you do with the person? And I guess to my point, just because something is so horrible to you that you can't understand it, doesn't mean that another person won't commit that evil act. We don't look at people who abuse children as somehow victims of mental illness. We view them as monsters. And to me, this is another place where that really has to be considered. And I don't know how it's going to pan out, but certainly people on the outside shouldn't be being like, well, we stand behind this person because we want to bring attention to postpartum depression. There's lots of ways to do that without backing up somebody who admitted to slowly strangling all three of her children to death. That seems like an absolutely insane proposition, but I think it has to do with that tribalism that we're talking about, where people are going to go to bat for someone in their tribe, no matter how obvious. Remember the Carmelo Anthony thing, no matter how obvious what they did was, no matter how heinous what they did, no matter how senseless, no matter how obviously evil the act is, they're part of your tribe, and therefore they are owed the defense of the tribe. And that to me is a pretty disturbing idea there. And I think a lot of people find the therapeutic ideal appealing as well. They want the idea of people somehow not being responsible for their actions to be a prevalent line of thought, maybe so that they are not responsible for their actions, maybe so that they get sympathy. I've already heard of people possibly doing like copycat killing. I have a lot of doubts that that is actually something that people would do, right? But it's a possibility that if you promote this is a normal, natural response, then people are going to normally and naturally respond to it. So I would love to know your thoughts on this, whether this is the example of the limits to the insanity defense. If you want my personal opinion, it's like it calls into question the entire idea of the insanity defense, because there's a person receiving the treatment for the mental illness, and yet they were still able to premeditate, in my opinion, a really incredibly heinous act. And so that leaves you the question of, well, maybe that's all a bunch of bunk. This person actually wasn't crazy. If they were receiving treatment, obviously that should have cured the insanity, right? Oh, maybe insanity can't be cured. This person should have already been locked up, and now they should be locked up forever, right? And then the need for society to have justice, to know that if somebody kills a child, kills several children, kills their own flesh and blood, which is an especially heinous act, that there is some sort of justice for them. There's some sort of retribution. There's something that they must suffer as a result of that action, and that others need to know that those actions, that there will be consequences to that there will be suffering for them when they cause suffering to other people. So those are my two lines of thinking there, but I'd love to know your lines of thinking too. Leave them to me down below, and I will check you all next time. Have as good a day as you can have.